Al Jazeera podcasts.
Today, as the war in Iran rages on, Iraqis are finding themselves caught in the crossfire.
Even if it stops, it has opened a wound that may become worse as time goes.
Why are both sides attacking Iraq? I'm Kevin Hirten, and this is The Take. Before we continue with today's show, we want to keep telling you these overlooked stories, the ones this war is pushing to the sidelines, the ones that don't make the big headlines. So what do you make of this one? Do you want to hear more about places in the region that don't get the media coverage? If so, leave us a comment. Tell us what we should do next.
My name is Abdulla Hawez. I am a researcher based in London focused on the Middle East, especially the geopolitics of the Middle East, particularly places like Iraq, Iran, and the neighboring countries.
Abdulla, welcome to The Take.
Thank you.
Let me set the scene just a little bit, because there's been a lot of fighting happening in Iraq since the war started on February 28th. But I was thinking, before we dive into these issues, we could take a step back and talk about Iraq itself. Maybe you can tell us in the broadest possible strokes, who are the actors who are sharing power in Iraq right now and how they're doing it?
Yeah, so Iraq is basically, there are three main actors. You have Shias, you have Sunni Arabs, and then you have Kurds. So these are the main actors who basically make the Iraqi state. And within the Shias, obviously, you have people who are closer to Iran, some people who are less close to Iran, who want an actual Iraqi national project. And then within the Sunnis, you have various actors. Some of them are closer to Iran as well. Some of them are closer to the Gulf countries, to the West. It's the same with Kurds. You have several Kurdish actors in the north.
Why don't you actually give me a picture of the situation before the war broke out on February 28th?
So before the war, basically, you had these actors. But in November 2025, Iraq held parliamentary elections.
Celebrations for a new political chapter in Baghdad's Tahrir Square. Supporters of several major blocs are hailing the election's high turnout as a victory for democracy itself.
And after this, we have not had a new government in Iraq yet because of the United States pressure. Because one of the key conditions of the United States has been to, let's say, dismantle the pro-Iran Shia militias. And the U.S., let's say, blessing in a way is important for Iraq because most of the Iraqi oil, which basically makes, 90% of the revenue of Iraq goes through the U.S. Federal Reserves. So it's a really complicated situation. But basically, you have these actors. You have had United States trying to basically weaken or, let's say, dismantle the militias through basically folding them to the security forces in Iraq.
Okay, so just to pull it back even further. So there was an election in November in 2025, but no new government was formed. So right now, Iraq has a caretaker government. They can't agree on a candidate. One reason is because the U.S. is effectively vetoing the favored candidate for the Shia faction, and the U.S. has a little bit of a say or a veto over who the Shia majority can actually seat as the prime minister.
Exactly. I wouldn't say a little bit.
Wow.
I think they have a big say. Because as I said, 90% of the Iraqi oil goes through the U.S. And for example, if they sanction it, Iraq as the current entity would collapse because the binding, let's say, consensus in Iraq is this revenue that's shared between Shias, Kurds, and Sunnis. If you don't have that, it's going to be very problematic.
So what about these Iran-backed militias? On the one hand, we've seen, U.S. and Israeli forces attacking these Iran-backed militias within Iraq. These are called the Popular Mobilization Forces, or PMF. And then on the other hand, these Iran-backed militias are conducting near daily drone strikes on U.S. bases as well as other pieces of vital infrastructure. How do they fit into Iraqi power structures?
Yeah, so the militias, by the way, we have dozens of different militias, which are collectively called Popular Mobilization Forces. Some of them are very close to Iran. Some of them, I would say, are further, and some of them are not that close to Iran. They're, in fact, much closer to the Iraqi Shia establishment. So you have these. The focus right now is on the ones who are closest to Iran, because some of them are directly commanded by the Iranian IRGC. So these groups are physically very powerful because they have the most sophisticated weapons in Iraq. In terms of training, they have the best training. And also politically, they are powerful because if you are standing in their way, you will be seen, especially within the Shia camp, as somebody who is basically aligning with the anti-Shia and anti-Iran project, which is basically not very popular within the current Shia establishment.
Okay, so let's flash forward to February 28th, when, as our audience knows very well, Israel and the U.S. launched this ongoing war in Iran. The war soon escalated into a full regional conflict, one of the terrible things for Iraq is that it's the only country whose population is enduring attacks from both sides of the conflict.
So, yeah, as you said, it's interestingly the only country that's bombed by everyone, basically. So you have, as we said, you have Kurds in the north. They have their own armed forces called Peshmerga. You have the Shia militias who are basically everywhere else. Especially they are active in the Sunni areas and in what we call disputed areas, which is basically disputed between the Kurdistan region and the federal Iraq. But demographically, it's very mosaic: Kurds, Sunnis, Turkmen, and Christians and others. So right now, you have, for example, these militias attacking the Kurdistan region, Israeli and American airstrikes targeting the Shia militias, Iranians targeting certain places where there are U.S. presence, because there are U.S. bases. Actually, you have these militias who are also attacking everywhere else in Iraq where they see U.S. interests or presence. So basically, you have everyone attacking everyone, because it's a country, but you really have different entities within this country who have different interests.
And you have family there at the moment.
Yes, my family mostly are in Erbil right now. It's basically, in a way, a war zone because there's constant noise of drones, of aircraft flying over it. There has been a lot of attacks because there's a U.S. base inside Erbil International Airport, which is basically inside the city. There has been a lot of interceptions, and some of them obviously stuck their targets. So it's very, very noisy, especially for kids. It's actually traumatic. And Erbil is a city of a couple million. So really everybody, even if you are further from the target, would hear the interceptions and the noise of the drones and so on.
As you said, the attacks are just happening everywhere. We tend to focus on what's happening in Iran or Israel or the Gulf, but if you just go through the list of targets, I mean, things are getting very tense, aren't they?
Exactly. But I think the Iraqi prime minister is under a lot of pressure from the militias and Shias, seeing him as not doing enough to rise up his voice against the repeated airstrikes. For example, in one of the attacks, not Shia militias, but 7 Iraqi soldiers were killed. They were probably, we don't know yet fully, but they were probably sharing the same base with the Popular Mobilization Forces. But it just shows how complicated is it, because Popular Mobilization Forces are formally part of the Iraqi security apparatus. They are getting paid by the Iraqi government. They are actually officially part of the state institutions. So it's very complex in terms of not, targeting others. It just becomes, you would probably have more of these incidents going forward because the Iraqi army and the Popular Mobilization Forces are sharing a lot of bases.
That's really complicated. Islamic resistance in Iraq, which is this umbrella term for a group of actors within the Popular Mobilization Forces, or PMF, a lot of acronyms I know, but they've claimed 200 plus attacks since February 28th. I mean, this has serious consequences, and they do seem to be the ones on the front foot. Iraqi resistance groups actually agreed to a 24-hour ceasefire after a request from the United States and NATO to allow a withdrawal from Camp Victory in Baghdad. At the same time, al-Mayadeen reported that all Italian troops deployed as part of NATO have now fled to Jordan. Help me understand this withdrawal. How big of a deal is this?
Okay, so there's a NATO mission in Iraq, which is mostly for training and advisory purposes. So it probably makes a lot of sense for these to just at least temporarily redeploy from outside Iraq to minimize casualties. NATO presence is very symbolic. I mean, you only have really the US presence that matters.
We'll have more with Abdulla after the break. So, Abdulla, let's talk about the Kurds. And this is where things get complicated because, as you know, the Kurds are not a monolith. I mean, some groups have warm ties to Israel and the US, while others are close to Iran. So can you, in the simplest possible terms, try to give us a lay of the land, how these groups are affecting the contours of this current conflict?
Okay, so just so that we can picture it, we have Kurds in Iraq, in Iran, in Turkey, and in Syria. So you basically have this geography where Kurds live. And right now, for what matters, we have Kurds in Iraq and Iran that matters. So Iraqi Kurdistan is a federal region within Iraq, but it's really physically controls its own territory. And then they are also hosting several Iranian Kurdish opposition groups who are armed. And what it matters in terms of these groups, they, as you said, they are very complex in terms of their relations with the West, with Iran, and in between. This is why right now they haven't joined the war. This is the most important thing.
Yes.
We also have Iraqi Kurds who are divided, by the way. This is, I know, becoming complex, but it's important for this specific situation. You have Kurdistan Democratic Party led by Barzani family, who are controlling half of the Kurdistan region. And then you have the PUK, Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, who are led by the Talabani family. They are controlling the other half of the Kurdistan region. This matters because the relation of these two factions with the US differs, and the relation with Iran differs as well. KDP of the Barzani family have historically had
close ties to Israel and the US.
Exactly. But they have also tried not to cross certain lines with Iran because Iran is a powerful neighbor. They also have good ties with Turkey. And then you have PUK who have closer ties to Iran, but they are not a proxy. It's just tactical alliance because PUK shares almost all its border with Iran. So they have to have good relations with Iran. Otherwise, it just wouldn't work. But these Iranian Kurdish groups are divided between KDP zone and PUK zone.
All right. So Iran has fought Kurdish separatists for 40 years, right? But now Iran-backed militias are bombing Kurdish areas in Erbil, but they're not bombing Iranian Kurdish areas, right? So it makes me wonder, is this really about the Kurds, or is Erbil being punished for letting the US and Israel use its territory against Iran?
First of all, there has been a lot of attacks on Iranian Kurdish bases in the Iraqi Kurdistan. There has been more than 100 attacks on them. Actually, out of the casualties, six of the dead people in Iraqi Kurdistan are Iranian Kurdish fighters. Okay? So they are attacking them, but they're also attacking Erbil itself. I think, as you said, they are punishing Erbil as well due to hosting US troops. But if we zoom out and put it into context, the same thing is playing out in the Gulf. So it's very similar in this sense, actually. They are attacking all neighboring countries and regions who are hosting US troops who are probably actively part of this war. But Iraqi Kurds have tried and resisted becoming dragged into this war. They have been trying to say they are neutral as much as possible because they are a small actor. They cannot, for example, tell the US to just withdraw realistically. And they are also not able to, let's say, cut ties with Iran because of these attacks. They're trying to become, let's say, neutral as much as possible due to the dangers for the region and its future.
Yeah, it does sound like what you're describing is a powder keg.
Exactly.
They are walking a very fine line. They're sustaining attacks from within, from Iran-backed militias, and then from without, from the actual Iranian government directly. Tuesday, 6 Peshmerga were, Peshmerga is the military forces of Iraqi Kurdistan, were killed by Iranian missiles. So at the same time, they have a lot to lose, though, as you said, if they do respond. The status quo is something that they want to maintain at some level. What is the view in Erbil? How long can it keep up this level of restraint?
Yeah, it's very complicated and difficult because now we have dead Peshmerga, which are obviously directly killed by Iranian ballistic missiles. But obviously, the options are limited. I mean, for example, today, Nechirvan Barzani, the president of the Kurdistan region, said they have been in contact with the Iranians to see what happened, and Iranians apparently, at least according to him, admitted it was a mistake and that they offer condolences and they will have a formal, let's say, investigation. And I don't think, even with this, even if there are, other incidents in the future, unless it's major escalation, I don't think Iraqi Kurds will change their position because really they don't have a lot of options. I mean, what can they do?
What's your worst case scenario? Is there a fear that this might tear open fissures that were just beneath the surface, and that actually there could be more long-term damage to Iraq in the long run than even in a place like Iran by the time this thing is over?
Actually, I do, yes. I think the issue is Iraq is far more fragmented as a country. You have really, it shares the same name, but internally, it's a very fragmented country. Socially, it's very divided. You have now, for example, a few days ago, there was an attack by the Shia militias on the Iraq intelligence agency because they accused the Sunni and Kurdish factions of being spies for foreigners like the United States and Mossad. So imagine in a country like this, it's really very, very complicated. And the ramifications, I would say, are far-reaching. And it's not only about this Iran war. Even if it stops, it has opened a wound that may become worse as time goes.
Yeah. Abdulla, we're talking about a country that has endured decades of armed conflict. It's suffering from crippling political instability, and it's now facing major financial woes. 90% of Iraq's income is derived from oil that cannot be traded at the moment due to Iran's chokehold over the Strait of Hormuz. Big picture, how are you viewing what's happening now? Is this a new chapter, or do you think this is a story that started actually in 2003 with the U.S. invasion of Iraq?
In a way, it is a new chapter because, it obviously depends on how long this closure will continue. But if it drags on for months, it's going to be a major upset for the Iraqi, let's say the 2003 Shia-led order in Iraq, because the country, in a way, is really patched together through this social contract, which is mostly based through the public employment of a huge portion of the Iraqi society. And obviously that means they depend on the salary that comes from the financing of this oil. If that stops, only God knows what that will lead to, because Iraq already have seen massive protests due to poor public services, due to let's say, the massive corruption in the country. And if this drags on, it may lead to even bigger protests, not in the Kurdish or Sunni areas, probably in the Shia areas, because there are a lot of people who are very unhappy with the economic situation in the country.
I wonder what you say to, like you said, you have relatives who are living in Iraq right now who are listening to the drones, and there's children involved. I mean, what do you do when they ask you, like, what's coming? I mean, do you have anything hopeful to say, or do you have to just be honest and say that this might not get better anytime soon?
What I usually say, because I supposed to be the expert who tells them what's happening. I am telling them it's actually, it's not the time for experts, because with Trump, it's really very difficult to predict what happens. So my honest opinion to them is that I really don't know. It's not very optimistic because with what's happening, neither side may back down that easily, which means further escalation. So it's realistically, it's not a very optimistic picture, but who knows with Trump.